In one region of Japan, researchers studying aging and metabolic disease kept running into the same embarrassing problem. The people they expected to have the most visceral fat, older adults, sedentary lifestyles, no gym memberships, didn't. And when they finally asked what these people were doing differently, the answer had nothing to do with what they were eating. It was something they did around food, a timing and sequencing habit so ordinary that the researchers almost didn't write it down. This method works on a completely different biological lever than every fasting protocol in your feed, which is exactly why people who fast consistently still can't move visceral fat specifically. What the Japanese figured out, almost by accident, is that visceral fat follows different rules than the fat you can see. And once you understand what actually unlocks it, you'll look at your current routine and immediately spot the gap. Quick one before we get into this, always check with your doctor before making significant changes to your diet or fasting routine, especially if you have underlying health conditions. What I share here is educational, based on research and real experience, not personalized medical advice. Now let's go. When I first came across this research, I almost didn't take it seriously, not because it seemed wrong, because it seemed too quiet. I was deep in extended fasts, aggressive protocols, the whole thing. And here was this pattern from rural Japan that wasn't a protocol at all. No strict windows, no hour counts. Just a different relationship with eating that communities had been practicing for generations without ever calling it fasting. I almost scrolled past it. I'm glad I didn't, because at the time, I was working with guys doing everything right on paper. Consistent windows, real discipline, eating clean, and the belly, specifically the deep, round, stubborn kind that sits right below the navel, just wasn't moving. I'd been there myself. Fasting longer, restricting harder, white-knuckling through every craving, waist measurement barely moved. I thought my body was broken. Turned out I just didn't know what visceral fat actually responds to. And here's the thing to sit with before we go any further, because this is what most fasting content never tells you up front. Visceral fat is not playing by the same rules as the rest of your body fat. Every protocol you've ever tried was probably written for the fat you can see, not for this. When most people say belly fat, they mean the layer you can grab, sides, lower back, visible softness. That's subcutaneous fat. It responds to caloric deficits, to fasting, to exercise. Not easy to lose, but it plays by the rules you've been taught. Visceral fat is different. Packed inside your abdominal cavity, surrounding your organs. You can't grab it, but you can feel where it lives. The firm, round belly that doesn't flatten even when you lie down. Think of subcutaneous fat like a checking account. Your body moves in and out of it regularly. Visceral fat is more like a pension fund set up during a period of stress, designed specifically to be hard to liquidate. Your body doesn't touch it unless it receives a very specific biological signal that it's safe to do so. Not just calories are low. Not just it's been 16 hours. Something more targeted. Here's what makes this frustrating. You can be losing real, measurable fat, and the visceral belly stays exactly where it is. Because you're clearing the checking account while the pension fund sits behind a lock your protocol doesn't know how to open. So what unlocks it? That's what the Japanese found. And it's not what you're expecting. But before I get there, I need to show you why the way most of us eat is actively keeping that lock in place. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The researchers weren't studying fasting. They were studying why certain communities showed dramatically lower visceral fat, despite lifestyle factors that should have predicted the opposite. One pattern kept showing up, not a specific food, not a macronutrient ratio, a practice so embedded in traditional Japanese eating culture that the people doing it didn't even frame it as health behavior. They just called it eating correctly. The practice is called hara hachi bu, 8 parts out of 10. Eat until you're about 80% full, then stop. I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. That's it? And I almost closed the tab. But here's where it gets interesting. The impact of this practice on visceral fat has nothing to do with the calories saved. The calories are almost irrelevant. What matters is the hormonal signal that's stopping at 80% and how that signal changes everything that happens during the fasting window that follows. This is the part nobody in Western fasting content is talking about, and it's exactly why people who fast consistently still can't move visceral fat. Look, I put together a complete implementation guide in the pinned comment, everything laid out so you can apply it tonight, not just understand it. Grab it now, and if this is already hitting different from what you've been hearing out there, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the level we operate at here. When you eat past fullness, your body triggers a more significant insulin response than the food itself required. Overeating, even clean food, sends your pancreas into overdrive, and that insulin spike at the end of your meal directly sets the metabolic conditions of your entire fasting window. Think of insulin like a delivery truck that has to finish its route before anything else can happen. While it's running, fat burning is on hold. The bigger the load, the longer the truck is on the road. Your fast starts on the clock, but your body doesn't start burning fat until insulin clears. That can be 1, 2, even 3 hours into your window. But insulin is only part of it. Honestly, not even the most important part for visceral fat specifically. Here's the one most people don't see coming. When you consistently eat to fullness or past it, your body reads that pattern as abundance. And abundance has a flip side your body doesn't forget. After abundance comes potential scarcity. Your body's response is to quietly elevate cortisol during the overnight hours, just enough. A low-grade elevation most people never notice because you're asleep when it happens. And cortisol, overnight, has one very specific job when it comes to belly fat. It locks it down. Cortisol is your body's security guard for its most protected assets. Visceral fat has more cortisol receptors than any other fat depot in your body. When cortisol is elevated overnight, even mildly, visceral fat gets the signal to stay put, while growth hormone, which peaks during deep sleep and is one of your most powerful fat-burning tools, gets suppressed. So you fast, you sleep, you wake up thinking progress happened. But visceral fat had security standing outside all night. You never got past the door. Ever feel like you've been at this for months and that deep belly just refuses to move? Not the sides, specifically that stubborn belly pouch? That's not your genetics. That's this. The entire fasting conversation in the West is about the window. When you start, when you stop, how strict. The eating window gets treated like a container that just needs to be big enough. But the pressure you fill it with determines what happens inside while it's closed. You can run a perfect 18-hour fast and still have cortisol elevated all night, not because you did anything wrong during the fast, but because the meal before it sent the wrong signal. The guys who finally cracked visceral fat didn't change their fasting window. They changed what happened before it. I had a guy, mid-40s, fasting 18 hours a day for 5 months, waist completely stuck, about to give up. We didn't touch his window. We changed one meal. 3 things about it. 6 weeks later, nearly 3 inches off his waist. Same discipline. Different signal. So what are the 3 things? This is where it gets practical, and this is exactly what the Japanese practice translates into for your routine tonight. The first part, stop at 80%. Not a rough guess. Eat slowly enough that the satiety signal has time to register. It takes 15 to 20 minutes to travel from gut to brain. If you're eating fast, you've already overshot. Put the fork down when you feel satisfied, not when the plate is clean, when you feel like you could eat more, but don't need to. That's the target. Sound familiar? Eating to that point where you're clearly done, but keep going because the portion is in front of you. That extra few bites is the thing that sets up the lock every night. The second part, anchor that last meal in protein. When the meal is weighted toward refined carbs, pasta, rice, bread, your body enters the fast with a full glycogen tank and an insulin curve that runs long, even if you only ate to 80%. But when that same 80% meal is built around protein and healthy fat, your body reads the end of that meal completely differently. Cortisol has less reason to activate protection mode overnight. I've seen guys break a 2-month plateau without changing anything about their fasting window, just shifting what was on the plate. Not how much. The third part. Build a gap. Most people eat dinner and immediately start their fast, which means the highest insulin moment of their day is also the starting gun. Even a 60 to 90-minute gap changes this significantly. Insulin starts declining before the clock begins. The transition into fat-burning territory is faster. Short walk after dinner helps. Movement after eating burns through post-meal glucose, helps insulin clear, supports the cortisol decline you need overnight. Classic Kong lifestyle move, not because it's dramatic, but because it works every single night. A certain kind of guy hears all this and immediately turns it into a reason to do more. I need to eat even less, restrict harder, make the gap longer. Wrong direction. And it will make results worse. The 80% principle is not about eating less. It's about sending a different signal. Stopping at 80% because you're satisfied tells your body, resources are adequate, no need to protect the reserves. Stopping at 60% through white-knuckle discipline. That reads as scarcity. And scarcity activates cortisol just as reliably as overeating, just from the other direction. The target is sufficiency, not abundance, not scarcity. The specific feeling of, I had what I needed, I'm done. I know guys who've been fasting a year and still can't identify that feeling. Because diet culture trains you to either eat until you're done or restrict until it hurts. Nobody teaches the middle. That's actually the real practice here, not the fast. The eating. Fasting is a tool for freedom, not a prison. The moment any part of your protocol feels like punishment, something in the approach is wrong. Not your willpower, the approach. Gorilla Mind isn't about suffering more. It's about knowing the game well enough to stop playing it the hard way. The first thing most guys notice is the morning. Within the first week, there's a quality to waking up after a clean overnight sequence. Lighter, clearer, hunger present but calm. You'll feel the difference before you measure it. The second shift is the late-night pull. When evening cortisol stays elevated, it drives carb cravings after dinner. Your body in low-grade stress mode wanting quick fuel. When cortisol comes down properly, that pull loses power. The kitchen stops calling. Not because of discipline, because the biology changed. The waste is the third shift, the slow one. 3 to 4 weeks of consistent execution. Visceral fat responds to a sustained pattern, not a single good night. But once the overnight conditions are consistently right, cortisol quiet, growth hormone running, pension fund accessible, the waist starts moving in a way that wasn't happening before. Not from a longer fast, not from harder restriction, from a different signal. Everything I just laid out, it's all compiled in the pinned comment as a ready-to-use framework. No need to rewatch or take notes. Grab it, apply it to your next meal, and start paying attention to what happens differently in the morning. And if you want to keep going this deep on what's actually driving your results while you fast, subscribe. Because the hormonal environment around eating is exactly where we live here, and we're just getting started. Visceral fat is not stubborn because you're not disciplined enough. It's stubborn because it requires a specific biological environment to release. And most protocols never create that environment. They just make the window bigger and hope the body figures it out. It won't. Not for visceral fat, not without the signal. Fix the signal. The fast does the rest. Go focus on the carcass.